It was summertime and twilight. We were sitting on the porch of the farmhouse on the summit of the hill, and Aunt Rachel was sitting respectfully below our level on the steps, for she was our servant, then colored. She was of mighty frame and stature. She was 60 years old, but her eye was undimmed and her strength unabated. She was a cheerful, hearty soul, and it was no more trouble for her to laugh than it is for a bird to sing. She was under fire now, as usual, when day was done. That is to say, she was being chafed without mercy and was enjoying it. She would let off peal after peal of laughter and then sit with her face in her hands and shake with throes of enjoyment which she could no longer get breath enough to express. At such a moment as this, a thought occurred to me. Then I said, "Aunt Rachel, how is it that you have lived 60 years and never had any trouble?" She stopped quaking. She paused, and there was a moment of silence. Then she turned her face over her shoulder toward me and said, without even a smile in her voice, "Miss Dosey, is you in earnest?" It surprised me a good deal and sobered my manner and my speech, too. I said, "Well, that is, I thought that, I meant that, you can't have had any trouble. I've never heard you sigh, never seen your eye when there wasn't a laugh in it." She faced fairly around now and was full of earnestness. "Has I had any trouble, Miss Dosey? I was going to tell you, then I leave it to you. I was born down amongst the slaves. I knows all about slavery because I've been one of them my own self. Well, sir, I was raised down in old Fo Jenny. But my mother, she was from Maryland, and my soul, but she was terrible when she get hot. When she'd get into them tantrums, she always had one word that she said. She'd straighten herself up and put her fists on her hips, and she'd say, "Looky here, I want you to understand that I wasn't born in the mash to be fooled by trash. I was one of the old blue hen's chickens, I is." Because you see, that's what folks that's from Maryland calls theyselves, and they's proud of it. Well, sir, that was her word, and I don't ever forget it. Because she said it so much, and because she said it one time when my little Henry tore his wrist awful, and here busted his head open right up at the top of his forehead. And when the others didn't fly around fast enough to tend to him, and when they talked back at her, she says, "Looky here, I want you to understand that I wasn't born in the mash to be fooled by trash. I was one of the old blue hen's chickens, I is." And then she cleared that kitchen and bandaged up the child herself. So I says that word too when I was riled. Well, my old man, that's my husband, he was loving and kind to me. Just as loving and kind as you is to young wife. And we had children, 7 children. And we loved those children just same as you love you children. They was black, but the Lord don't make no children so black but what they mother loves them and wouldn't give them up, no, not for nothing that's in this whole world. Well, by and by my old mistress says she broke. She got to sell off all the slaves on the place. And when I hear that they want to sell us off at the auction in Richmond, oh, the good gracious, I know what that means. Aunt Rachel had gradually risen as she warmed to her subject, and now she towered above us, black against the stars. They put chains on us and put us on a stand high as this porch, 20 foot high. And all the people came around, crowds and crowds, and they come up there and squeeze our arm and make us get up and walk and then say, "This one too old," or "This one lame," or "This one don't amount to much." And then they sold my old man and took him away. They began to sell my children and take them away. And I began to cry, and the man said, "Shut up, your damn blubbering," and hit me on the mouth with his hand. And when the last one was gone but my little Henry, I grabbed him up close to my breast so as I rise up and I says, you shan't take him away, I says. You'll kill the man that touches him, I says. But my little Henry whisper and say, I'm going to run away and then I work and buy your freedom. Oh, bless the little child. He always so good. But they got him. They got him, the men did. But I most took and tore the clothes off their backs and hit them over the head with my chain. And they give it to me too, but I didn't mind about that. Well, there was my old man and all my children, all my 7 children, gone. And 6 of them I hasn't laid eyes on again to this day. And that was 32 years ago last Easter. Well, the man that bought me belonged in Newbern, and he took me there. By and by, the years rolled on. The war come. My master was a Confederate colonel, and I was his family's cook. So when the Unions took that town, they all run off and left me there all by myself with the other slaves in that monstrous big house. So then the big Union officers move in there and they say, would I cook for them? Lord bless you, I says, that's what I is for. They weren't no small fry officers, mind you. They was the biggest they is. And the way they made those soldiers mosey round, the general, he tell me to boss that kitchen. He said, anybody come meddling with you, you just make 'em walk chalk. Don't you be afeard now. You amongst friends. Well, I thinks to myself, if my little Henry ever got a chance to run away, he'd make it to the north, of course. So one day I goes in where the big officers was in the parlor, and I drops a curtsy so, and up and told him about my little Henry. What I come for, I says, is if my little Henry ever got a chance to run away, he'd make it to the north, of course, and maybe one of you gentlemen had run across him so you could tell me and I could find him again. Then the general looked mournful, and the general say, how long since you lose him? And I say, 13 year. The general say, won't be little no more. Now, he's a man. I never thought of that. He was only that little fella to me yet. But I see it then. None of the gentlemen had run across him, so they couldn't do nothing for me. But all that time, I didn't know it, my little Henry was run off to the north, years and years, and he was a barber too, and worked for himself. And by and by, when the war come, he up and says, I's done barbering, he says. I's going to find my old mammy, less'n she's dead. And he sold out, and he went to where there was recruiting, and hired himself out to a colonel for a servant. And then he went all through the battles, everywhere, hunting for his old mammy. Yes, indeed. He'd hire himself out to first to one officer and then another, till he ransacked the whole South. I didn't know nothing about this. How was I going to know it? Well, sir, one night we had a big soldier ball. The soldiers there at Newbern was always having balls and carrying on. They had them in my kitchen heaps of times because they were so big. Mind you, I was down on such doings because my place was with the officers, and it rasped me to have them common soldiers cavorting round in my kitchen like that. But I always stood by and kept things straight, I did. Sometimes they'd get my dander up, and then I'd make them clear that kitchen, mind I tell you. Well, one night, it was a Friday night, there come a whole platoon from a regiment that was on guard at the house. The house was headquarters, you know. And they was a waltzing and a dancing. My, but they was a having a time. And I just a swelling and a swelling up. Pretty soon, along comes such a spruce young black man dancing down the room with a yellow wench around the waist. And when they got abreast of me and went first a balancing on one leg and then on the other and smiling and making fun and smiling up at my big red turban, I up and says, "Get along with you, rubbish." The young man's face changed for about a second. Then he went back to smiling, same as before. Well, about then, in come some of them that played music and belonged to the band. And they never could get along without putting on airs. And the very first air they put on that night, I lit into them. They laughed and that made me worse. Then the rest of them got to laughing and my soul's alive, but I was hot. My eye was just blazing. And I straightens myself up and I put my fists on my hips and I says, "Looky here," I says, "I want you to understand that I wasn't born in the mash to be fooled by trash. I was one of the old blue hen's chickens, I is." And then I see that young man kind of staring up at the ceiling, stiff and looking like he forgot something. Couldn't remember it no more. Well, I just march on them, so looking like a general, and they just cave way before me and out the door. And as this young man was going out, I hear him say to another, "Jim," he says, "you go on, tell the captain I'll be on hand about 8 o'clock in the morning. There's something on my mind," he says. "I don't sleep no more this night. You go on now. Leave me by my own self." Well, this was about 1 o'clock in the morning. Well, about 7, I was up and on hand to get the officer's breakfast. And I was just a-stooping over by the stove, and I just opened the stove door and got a pan of hot biscuits in my hand when I seen this black face come round up under mine, and the eyes looking up into mine, and I just stopped right there and never budge. Just gaze and gaze. And the pan began to tremble. And all of a sudden, I knowed. The pan fell to the floor, and I grabbed his left wrist and I pushed the sleeve back. And I goes for his forehead and I pushed the hair back. And boy, I says, "If you ain't my Henry, what is you doing with that welt on your wrist and this scar on your forehead? The Lord God of heaven be praised. I got my own again." Oh no, Mr. C. I hasn't had any trouble and no joy.